Deborah, could you tell me, what do you think, what are the types of students that schools need to produce for the 21st century?
Well, I think there's a lot of concern amongst employers and other people about the fact that now in the 21st century it's not good enough just to be able to pass the exams in school. You've got to be able to think for yourself and you've got to be able to solve problems. So we need the kinds of skills that will enable students to do well in the workplace, but also to be really citizens who contribute to the fuller life of South Africa. And that business of being work ready and life ready is part of what a school needs to deliver now, as well as academic standards.
Okay, and in terms of success, what do we know about successful people? What makes them successful?
Well, I think we used to think in the past that there was only a relatively small number of people who could be successful because only a certain number of people had the kind of the genes that would enable that to happen. But now we know actually the route to success is more about the kinds of opportunities that you get, the kinds of support along the way, and your own personal motivation. So whilst we used to think potential was the key, now we think it's probably less important. And we also know that through neuroscience that our brain is actually more malleable than we ever thought. So we can build better brains. It is possible for people to develop, and so success is within reach of a larger number of people.
Good. So if one has to explain to a teacher how to view or understand a learner's potential, what would you say to a teacher?
I would say that our knowledge about all of that has changed, certainly within my teaching career, during my professional career. And whereas we did used to think that we had some children who were inevitably going to be the most able and some of whom were the slow learners, now it's just not so clear cut. What we know is that people develop at different rates, but that probably more people can achieve highly, and that instead of trying to segment learners into different groups within school, what we really need to be doing is looking at what are the competencies that they need to develop and how best can we develop them, creating the kind of environment that helps every student to think that success is a possibility for them.
Okay, and linking to the competencies that you just mentioned, what are these competencies that learners need to acquire to attain advanced performance?
Well, I think there's two types of competencies, and they're like the kind of DNA. So it's important that you use both parts of them, like the double helix. So one part is a set of competencies that relate to cognitive thinking and development, and they're the kinds of things like logical thinking and creative thinking, generalization, those kinds of characteristics. And then there's a second set of characteristics which are more about values and attributes and attitudes, and they're such things as resilience and perseverance, open-mindedness, a global outlook. And it's not one or the other. Sometimes in education we've thought, well, we've heard about the kinds of competencies that develop a cognitive ability, or we've heard about developing values education. But I think what the route to success is about combining the two. It's the intertwining of the two that leads to success. Because no matter how competent you are in terms of your thinking, if you really, for example, are not resilient and persistent, it's just really of no use to you, because it's a bumpy road to success. Everybody meets obstacles, and if they don't have the persistence and resilience to overcome them, then they're not going to get to success. And in a similar kind of way, if they're not open-minded in the way that they think, then they're just going to go down one particular route, and if that route doesn't work, then they've got nowhere else to go. They need to think flexibly and creatively, and think of a lot of possibilities of ways to proceed.
Good. And would you think there are other hidden mechanisms that could support education systems to achieve this advanced performance for all learners?
Well, I think that the important thing about the education system is that it has to change so that it expects that kind of advanced performance for all learners, instead of structuring in such a way as to expect that every child is progressing at exactly the same rate. And if a student doesn't progress fast enough, that there's something permanently that is wrong with that child. It's not wrong with that child. They're just performing at that particular time at a level that's behind other people. But the example that I would give you is that if you are thinking about something like learning to drive, some people take a lot of lessons to get to their test. Other people pass their test really very quickly. But it makes absolutely no difference whether you had a lot of lessons or a few lessons to how good a driver you are in the long run. It really doesn't matter how long it takes to get there. It's the destination that matters. And I think in education, we need to be more tolerant about recognizing the destination is the important objective. We have a vision for where we want our students to be. Some students will progress quite rapidly towards that, but we shouldn't dismiss the other students and think they can't get there. We have to look at removing the barriers that stop people getting to success. We need to be more inclusive about all of that, and we just need to be thinking it is possible. We need to be travelling in hope when it comes to our students. Every student sitting in front of us in the classroom is a potential high performer.
Good. And I have read such a lot about approaches that can advance learning. What would you regard as the best, or might be the best, to advance learning in classrooms?
Well, I do think you need to set up particular structures and climate within the classroom. So a sort of starting point is that you do need your students to be actively engaged in their own learning. They need to take control of their learning and self-regulate. So it's important to, if you're going to get advanced learning, to be providing opportunities for students to think for themselves, to problem solve, to research, to undertake the sort of higher level cognitive types of activities as a matter of course. And you know, if you take something like connection finding, which is a higher level skill that you'd want to teach, you don't have to wait till somebody is 14 before you teach connection finding. You can teach it to a 3-year-old. And the earlier you begin, the more competent they become at any of those particular advanced skills.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for sharing your information and your expertise about high performance learning with us, and I'm sure we in South Africa would be able to utilize a lot of your suggestions.